Hey, Ray, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's awesome to have you here. I'm really glad we could connect. And I feel like we should just jump right into it. You started as a meat eater of
Okay.
the typical Cuban diet, but now you're vegan. So, how the hell did that happen?
Well, I had some health issues about 10 years ago, and I went to a doctor. I tried to go to my doctor, but I couldn't see him for like another week. My issue ended up being gouts. So I had these gout attacks that were very powerful. Um, and what's funny is I didn't even realize that I had gout. I thought I had injured myself because I'm a judo practitioner for about 27 years or so. So I thought I just stubbed my toe in a competition or something.
Hmm.
And as the pain got more intense, um, by the third attack, which happened in like a span of 3 weeks or so, I found myself in one of those clinics that you walk into because I couldn't see my doctor, and I met a doctor that changed my life. She laid it out for me. She told me that my symptom was diet related, and that at some point I would have to consider being vegan. She said that people tend to be more sensitive than others to animal products. And clearly, I had some built in triggers in my genetics that were kind of telling me that my diet was affecting me negatively. She said something very curious to me. She said that gout and kidney stones and prostate problems manifest together, and they're all related genetically.
Hmm.
And it was curious because when I went there, yeah, she told me that, and I had already had a kidney stone. So, and my father had suffered from prostate problems and kidney stones most of his life. So she said that those are passed down, and they're basically triggers, kind of like canaries in the coal mine, telling you that what you're doing to yourself is leading to a bigger issue. In my case, it was heart disease. She said that the gout and the kidney stones were all related and all canaries in the coal mine, so to speak. And she said, look, I can give you medicine to take away your gout. It'll be gone in 2 days. Or if you really want to address the issue, you're going to have to consider being plant based. And I got to tell you, I was more upset about that declaration at that point because I wasn't expecting it than the actual gout. Um, and I didn't take. I listened to her, and then I immediately got a second opinion. I saw my doctor, and my doctor told me something completely different. He said that that as you get older. Now, mind you, I was 37, 36 or 37 when I had these issues beginning. He said, as you get older, your conditions and your genetic dispositions to food are going to manifest, and there's not much you can do about it. You're just going to have to diet, lose weight, and take whatever pills, which is seems to be the standard issue answer from most established doctors. And I wasn't buying it. I couldn't believe that two people were so different in opinion. It was night and day. So I just started to research, and it took me a few years, and I realized that I had been brainwashed for many years with my diet, and it bothered me because as a Cuban, food to us is part of our culture. Every dish that I know how to make was passed down to me by my grandmother and all
Mhm.
her sisters, and it's a whole big system of culture, so to speak. And I wasn't ready to give that up, so I had to figure out a way to um, to get my food back, and that's kind of what led me to writing this book and creating vegan solutions for my problems. And it actually ended up being one of the best things I ever did because I eat just as well as I used to, and I don't have any elements. I don't even worry about my health anymore because every time I go to the doctor, all my levels are fine. Everything is always perfect. And that's attributable, obviously, to being a vegan and not having any animal products in my system.
That's amazing. What a story. So, obviously, you yourself have had this transformation almost. I mean, I don't really like the term because it's very cliche in the fitness world, but it's kind of true. I mean, you turned your health around. And what's surprising to me is that somebody as a professional in the health slash medical field would come to you with veganism as the number one thing? I mean, obviously, everyone who's vegan knows this, but I was just talking with someone in the field, and it's not really the go-to approach yet. You know, like you had with your doctor, the experience there around, oh yeah, just take some meds. You don't need to change your diet. You'll be fine. The whole, dude, you need to go vegan immediately is, first of all, so important, and it's going to save lives. But second of all, it's not really done a ton. So it was actually good luck, or whatever you want to call it, that you ended up connecting with that professional who said, hey, you need to go plant-based for your own health, because this is what's going to create long-term change, which is pretty huge. So have you noticed other things? I mean, obviously the gout was one of the main things that you had challenges with at first, but how has being vegan changed other aspects of your life?
Well, it's changed just about every aspect of my life, from physical to, I mean, I don't want to sound like corny, but like, spiritually as well. I feel,
Sure.
I feel like it's just a lot simpler to be
Hmm.
vegan, and the simplicity lends itself to every aspect. I mean, when you think about it, like, when the first 2 weeks, and I'm sure you experienced this too, my hair got better, my skin cleared up. In the first 2 years, I lost 55 pounds without even trying. I
Wow.
wasn't I
That's
was never a
amazing.
dieter. I mean, I've always been reasonable shape. No, no,
Hmm.
really. I mean, I practiced judo for 20 years off and on, so I was athletic. I used to run 6 miles a day. This all happened right at the gout thing. Like, I was at the top of my game as far as how physically fit I was, and yet I was still sick. And as soon as I made that change, it's immediate. I mean, there's no medicine that can ever mimic this. I mean, you lose weight, your skin feels better. You have to sleep less, which is amazing to me. Like, I don't have a requirement of sleeping anymore. I was telling somebody, I was telling the interviewer yesterday, who was a fitness person as well, that even if I don't work out for a period of time, when I do lift, and if I do lift something heavy, I don't get sore anymore.
Hmm.
I mean, it's almost like you're kind of in shape, even though it's the oddest thing in the world. And I think it happens to, I think it all comes down to feeding your machine what it's supposed to be fed. And you have incredible gains, you have incredible, turnarounds, you have incredible feelings associated with that you can't quite explain to somebody unless they've kind of gone through it. And it all happens immediately. And like I tell most people, you can eat twice as much as of anything as if you're vegan, and you really won't put you really have to try hard to put on weight, and you just live better. I mean, there's every aspect is simpler. Even the food is less expensive. I mean, on every front, it's just a better way to be. And obviously, I didn't know that for the most for the first 36 years of my life. So now that I learned that, I want to teach my children that. I converted my wife, which was pretty easy because she was, she was kind of interested in it to begin with anyway. And we live very happily, like vegetarian. Well, she has some vegetarian stuff. I'm mostly vegan. I would say 99.9% of the time I'm vegan. I'll have the occasional vegetarian meal, but for the most part, I can't even tolerate the smell of animals anymore. Like, I can smell it at work when people have like, they'll have chicken wings. I can almost
Mm.
smell the feathers on the animal at this point, which is incredible to me. Like, before it used to be so appetizing, and now I'm repulsed. It's strange how your body reacts to it.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also strange how quickly you can notice differences when you make that switch, especially coming from a place where it was like the so-called standard Cuban diet or standard American diet, whatever you want to call it, something that was animal product based, and now you're making this huge switch. I think a lot of people are actually surprised at how quickly they notice these things happening with energy levels and the sleep and the recovery from workouts, because you're now eating so many antioxidants. So I think that's pretty major. It's pretty major. And this is something that a lot of medical professionals should be having basically as the number one thing they're recommending to their patients.
Yeah, they should, especially older people. My aunt was, I mean, obviously she's a Cuban lady, right? And she's been on the diet, our Cuban diet, for years. And I remember when I made the change, she was complaining to me because her cholesterol was high, and they put her on medication, and the medication was worse than the cholesterol. She had joint
Hmm.
pains. She was, I mean, it was even bothering her bladder. And she said to me, she's like, look, I just think that maybe I just have high cholesterol and maybe I should just live with it. And I said, no, nobody has high cholesterol. You're ingesting all the cholesterol. So just try it. Try it for 30 days. And I promise you, as your nephew, that you're gonna see a significant change and you're gonna want to do it. And in those first, and let me tell you, it was hard. I had to wrestle her into it. Really, we had to like have sit down conversations and say, look, it's not the end of the world if you don't have whole milk. Try something else. Try oat milk. Pick one that you like. There's many of them. There's got to be something that you like. And she did. She ended up drinking coconut milk with her coffee. But after the 30 days went by, she lost weight. She went to the doctor for the sake of testing her cholesterol, and her cholesterol went down 90 points.
In 30 days? Holy.
Unreal, right? And even when she went to the doctor was like, I think you're probably taking too much of the cholesterol medicine.
Haha.
No, I gave it up because I couldn't tolerate it. And all I did was just take out all animal products, all of it. And boom, obviously she stuck to it. And now she's super healthy. And actually, she regrets not doing it, 40 years ago. She's like,
Absolutely.
my life in my 70s, every time I go to the doctor, I'm not afraid of my.
Mm.
And that's how I feel. Like I don't even worry about my health anymore because I know that I'm not putting anything in my body that's going to be a giant detriment. I mean, obviously you can't live forever, but I don't ever feel sick. I don't ever get colds. I've never had the flu that I can remember in any time in the last 2 decades.
Hmm.
I have no issues other than injuries from all the wrestling I've done. That's my only ailment.
Yeah, that's a
But other
different
than that,
situation.
yeah, there's nothing I can do about that at this point. But everything else, it's so simple. It really is.
Hmm.
Hard to
Absolutely.
communicate that, you know?
Well, it's one of those
Don't believe.
things. Yeah, it's one of those things like we have a lot of clients, for example, who don't understand the benefits of strength training, especially if they're coming from an like endurance sport world. They're like, I don't need to strength train, whatever. But you can't really communicate how this is going to change your life. And I'm not saying that as an exaggeration until you actually do it. And it's the same with being vegan. And of course, I mean, you could sit around and eat Oreos all day and technically be vegan. So we're talking about like good quality, nutrient dense foods here, clearly. But it's kind of the same. You just got to do it. And most of our listeners are either vegan already or they're vegan curious. And so there's a lot of people who may just be looking for that little extra kick in the ass, like this
Sure.
is it. This is officially it.
I think most people get hung up on the unknown.
Right.
That's what it
Right.
is. They don't know that it doesn't have to be just you sucking down a kale shake. Like that is veganism. You know what I'm saying? Like there's plenty of things that you can eat. There's plenty of meat substitutes that you can use if you want to. I mean, you don't even
Hmm.
have them, but if you have that craving, it's out there. And you can do it. And, I mean, I don't necessarily recommend eating, too many processed foods, even if they're vegan. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you. But if
Exactly.
you have it, okay, if you need it for the sake of converting and then maybe ending up like completely whole food, plant based, then maybe that could be a crutch to get you there.
Exactly.
Part of the reason why I wrote the book the way I did, I kind of like, I'm not trying to sell the book to vegans. Okay. If you're a vegan, you already know all the amazing health benefits. Okay. I'm trying
Right.
to get people that are not convinced that
Hmm.
they can live
Hmm.
that way and eat well. And everybody who I've ever cooked a meal for, they've told me, I could eat this every day. So if that's the case, so be it. Try it and just it's a game of inches, right? You do it like once a week, and then maybe you do it twice a week, and then maybe you do it 1 week out of the month, and then before you know it, you're at 25 days, and then before you know it, you're completely free of it.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably a good way to to approach things.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't we approach the Cuban aspect? So being Cuban, the importance of Cuban cuisine to Cubans, right? I mean, this is ingrained culturally, and your experience of writing this book, which has a lot of traditional recipes in it, especially from older family members of yours. So, and you're also working to keep these traditions alive, but in a vegan way. And you want to pass down things like your grandma's family recipes to the next generation, but in vegan form. So, let's talk about the Cuban diet first of all. So, like, what's the background here? What is the so-called standard Cuban diet? Or like
Cuban, the
how
Cuban,
is it kind of formulated?
the Cuban diet is the Western diet.
Okay.
It just happens to be the Latin version of it.
Okay.
Every every available meat, you know, every fowl, everything is included. The Cuban diet is very varied and very vast. Okay,
Mhm.
there are meals that are by themselves vegan. There are meals that, if you know, are obviously heavy in pork, heavy in chicken, heavy in beef. Um, it was important to me because I don't know if this is obvious with a lot of Latin people. It's obvious with Cubans. Our food is part of our identity.
Mm.
Okay, it's a cultural thing. When you're Cuban or you're Latin, food is always, you know, the thing that happens next. Like if you meet somebody, you have food with them, right? You if you bring someone into your family, you're gonna feed them.
Mhm.
Kind of how the whole thing happens, and we take a lot of pride in how we cook. Take a lot of pride in the flavors because I mean, when I think about it, when I was a teenager growing up, I grew up in Yonkers, New York. I'm first generation. My all my family's from Cuba, and our food was so different than like my friends' food. Like if I got invited to their house and they had meatloaf and mashed potatoes, not that I'm knocking meatloaf and mashed potatoes, it was nothing compared to the food that we had in our house every day. I mean,
Mhm.
I had foods that were, you know, based in Spain and, you know, it was just a cuisine that we cooked. It wasn't never eclectic. It was always Cuban everything. Um, Part of the reason for that, I believe, anyway, and what I felt growing up. Obviously, I mean, I don't know how much you know about Cuba, but Cuba fell to communism, you know, before 1960, and everybody in my family had to flee. Um, you had to leave because communism, they didn't give you much of an option. You were either enslaved in communism or you had to run out. And we left. And my grandmother made it a mission to connect us to old Cuba through the foods that she made. Okay,
Mhm.
you know, telling us where this came from, always telling us when was the first time she ate it, whose favorite meal it was, and somehow you just those little anecdotal touches to the food connected you deeper to the country. And for me, that's a connection that I'm very proud of. Like I'm very proud of all my family members. The older generation are the best people I've ever known in my life. And you know, I mean, I'm almost 50, and I was still thinking about my grandmother, and I lost her when she was 15, when I was 15 rather.
Mm.
So it's a deep connection, and I don't know if every Cuban does it, but my family and my extended family, we all, you know, everybody cooks Cuban, everybody sits together and eats together, everybody, you know, has the same memories. The smells of the food bring you back in time to like, I mean, obviously with everybody, it's always a better memory, hopefully, right? You go back in time to when you were a kid and when your grandmother's making something or your parents or whomever. And there's that connection always to that island for us. Um, and that's part of the reason. I mean, there's a few reasons why I wrote the book. I think mostly it's a tribute to my grandmother.
Mm.
Um, Although at first it was a practical approach because I needed to eat food that I liked in order to become a vegan. Um, but as I wrote it, I started to realize that I miss her.
Right.
You know, I just kept writing and writing and writing, and before I knew it, it was kind of a tribute to her, which you know I'm proud of. I mean, if anything, I don't know whatever will arise from this book, um, but I got that out there for her, and yeah, that's pretty much the crux of why I wrote that book.
That
Where,
is incredible. So a lot of the recipes that are in this book are in this tradition of passing down things through food. It's not just about the food itself, it's also about what's associated with it, cultural connotations, memories. I think that's amazing. I mean, I'm not speaking for everyone here, but I think folks in North America, sure, maybe certain foods are part of their identity. I mean, we know this as vegans because we come across it all the time with people being like, steak is in my DNA and all this bullshit, right?
it's
But
terrible.
yeah, it's not the same though. There's not this like deep cultural connection to our food and what kind of folks passed it down to us and where does it come from and what does it mean and what do the smells remind us of and all this thing. Like I don't really think we have that so much generally in Canada or the States. I'm in Canada, so I can't speak for all of North America, obviously. But, I mean, half of my family is German and half of my family is from England. Not exactly known for a lot of like long-standing culinary traditions. I feel like in Germany there's more. And so my family has veganized a lot of Latvian, Baltic German recipes. And so there's a little bit more connection there, but I don't know. Would you agree? Like it's very different living in Canada or the States with how food is seen.
Yes, I agree with that, and I think I'll extend it beyond Cuban. I think it's a Latin American thing.
Right. Okay.
Latin Americans, and I'm sure in Canada, if you go to, and I'm sure there has to be some Latin American community in
Oh,
Canada,
yeah.
they have the same connection or a similar connection that I have to mine. My wife is Colombian; they have a connection to their food. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. It's you're brought up that way. Like I remember Christmas Eve was like the biggest meal that we had the whole year, and it was a big roast pig. It was always the same thing. It was a giant roast pig, you know, pots and pans full of rice and beans and yuca and potatoes, and it was a thing, you know.
Hmm.
And everybody came over to eat that thing and celebrate that thing, and the music was salsa music from like the 1940s that we all listened to, and it's kind of like I guess the closest thing that a non-Latin culture would have is like Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
Thanksgiving to us is almost every day because we eat well every day. Like I write in my book, and I'm not bragging, I'm not putting down anything else, but I didn't have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich until I was almost 20 years old.
Yeah, that says
Never,
something.
we never had that. We never had it every day. And granted, it was different back then, right? Because most women, I wouldn't say most women, but my grandmother stayed home all her life, so she
Hmm.
was cooking all the time. And we had soups, we had appetizers, we had salads, we had, beef dishes, pork dishes, fish dishes, all of these dishes, and everything was different every day. And that's part of her goal. Her goal was to keep that alive. And quite frankly, I'm so happy I was raised that way because I have the same connection with my family. Like we all sit down and we all eat together. Now,
Hmm.
I work, my wife works, so a lot of the food that we make will be on the weekends. We have it frozen so that we can just pop it open and just eat it. That's another thing too. That's one of the challenges with becoming a vegan. You have to have food ready. You
Oh,
do
yeah.
because
It's all
you
about the
can't
food prep.
slap anything on the grill. Like there's no such thing. So you have to make sure it's there. You have to make sure you have it. But once you do that, the rest is fairly easy to maintain.
Hmm.
And I think like I passed it on to my son. I have three children. I have one. My oldest is 17, and then I have two babies. My 17-year-old is not a vegan. Okay, but he's not against it either.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you one thing, it's a big compliment to me. Every single time, if I have people over that I know are not vegans, I'll make something for them. Um, I don't want to be obnoxious about it and force people to eat something they don't want to eat. So I'll always have, like, if we have a barbecue, I'll have hamburgers, hot dogs, that kind of thing for the folks that eat it. And my son is free to pick whatever he wants, and he always gravitates to the Cuban food,
Hmm.
and it has nothing to do with it being vegan. He just considers it, dad's food, you know, the Cuban culture food. And he pays me a giant compliment every time he does that because for a teenager not to pick a cheeseburger,
Yeah, that's huge.
Arroz con pollo or something, that's uniquely Cuban. I think it's a testament to the quality of the food, and that's not my invention. That's the recipes that we make. All I'm doing is swapping out animal product and putting in plant equivalents. That's all I've done, and it works. It works very well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So what are some of these ingredients in your whole overarching mission of passing down these recipes, making them available to people, whether they're Cuban or not? I mean, I'm not Cuban, but I am very interested and I checked out your book and I'm going to totally try these recipes. So, I mean, this whole overarching mission of sharing these things, passing them down, furthering the tradition, what are some of the specifics? So, like, what are ingredients that you often have to swap? What are some ingredients that maybe you had to experiment with a little bit? Like, can we go into some specifics here?
Yeah, sure. I had a hard time trying to find a plant substitute that will mimic shredded meats.
Oh, interesting.
There are shredded, not many of the recipes, but the very famous ones involve shredded meat of some sort. One that comes to mind is ropa vieja. Ropa vieja means old clothes, and it's just shredded meat in a sauce. Okay, but to find something that imitates shredded meat is pretty hard. So I experimented with. I started with seitan, but seitan doesn't shred that well. So then I found this other product. I found it on Amazon. It's called, I believe they're Butler soy curls. Have you?
Oh, yes. Those are classic. They
They're
don't
great.
shred super well, though, do they?
Well, they come kind of looking shredded.
Okay, yeah, that's
So
true.
when you hydrate them, they come out kind of like long pieces of stringy soy.
Mhm.
And I like them because they're pretty flavor neutral. Like they don't taste like anything. So by the time I flavor them and I make the sauce for the ropa vieja, the end result is ropa vieja. Okay, it
Huh.
tastes just like it. Um, there's other things like there's ground beef recipes that are used. I found ground soy to work very well with that. Ground soy is almost seamless. I mean, I can't tell the difference, honestly, between ground beef and ground soy if you do it right, if you season it the right way.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing that I use quite a bit, but I didn't use it as much in the book because I find it a little hard to process. Jackfruit and water. Have you had jackfruit and water?
Yes.
Jackfruit it's a challenge, and I didn't put in more recipes because the prep to get it right takes a little bit of time, and I don't think a lot of people want to dedicate an extra hour to cooking something. Some people do. Like for example, I put jackfruit in my grandmother's recipe for paella. You know what paella is?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Jack.
haven't never made one that I'm happy with, mind you, but yeah.
Well,
Technically, I know how it should be.
the problem with fish type foods is that they never quite taste fishy
Right.
if it's vegan.
Mhm.
I cheated on some of those recipes. I have some recipes in my book that are vegetarian because I'm trying to appeal to a broader audience. Like I said earlier, I didn't necessarily write the book for vegans because if you're a vegan, you already understand how valuable it is to eat this stuff.
Mhm.
But for the folks that are on the edge, like if I can convince somebody to eat my food because it tastes a certain way, and if it has a minute amount of animal product in it, not enough to bother anyone, I'll present it that way. Like for example, paella in my recipe has a bit of clam juice in it. Now, I don't want anyone killing clams, and I don't necessarily eat clams, but if you look at the nutritional value of the clam bottle, there's no protein in it, there's no cholesterol in it, it's just flavor. So if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. I write in the book, look, if you are completely against animal products, don't include it. But the only
Mhm.
way to make it taste like paella is by adding a little bit of fish taste to it, which I'm not opposed to. Um, but that's how you do it. And the jackfruit's amazing because the jackfruit ends up being flaky like tuna. And I brought it to work one day. I work with a lot of Asians, and one of my Chinese friends, Steve Zhu, asked me if it was tuna,
Hmm.
and I
Wow.
said, no, not. It's jackfruit. He's like, well, it imitates tuna so well that you fooled me. So look, I mean, there's ways to do it, right? It made me very happy that he said that because it was confirmation of my own belief. I thought the recipe came out pretty good, even though I had to cheat a little bit with the clam juice. If I can find something else that does it that's plant based, I'll certainly swap it in. But I can't, like, fish is hard. Fish is one of those things that either tastes like fish or doesn't, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a deal breaker for me because I have maybe a handful of recipes in the book that take a vegetarian turn, and that I did that just to straddle the market a little bit more, so that people can come on board and say, I always think it's easier when you give people kind of an out.
Mm-hmm.
If it's an all or none thing, I think most people won't even try. Right? I'm sure you see that in the fitness world. I mean, if you say, hey, look, the first thing we're going to do today, even though you haven't run in 20 years, is run 6 miles,
Yeah,
you're going to turn
exactly.
people off, you
Oh
know?
yeah.
But if you say, look, why don't we try running 100 yards first? See how you feel and walk a lap around the track and try it again. That's a different way of building to what you're trying to get to. And that's kind of how I approach these recipes. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know. Some people are very strict with veganism. I consider myself a strict vegan, but I understand human nature enough to know how to try to get people to you, is just teaching them that there's alternatives instead of preaching to people and saying, well, look, if you don't do this, you're going to die early. All that doom and gloom, I don't think gets you as far as saying, try it with a little bit of clam juice. Throw a little lime on it. See if you like it.
Totally.
Approach tends to work.
Yeah, I'm with you in that there's a lot of vegans out there who are all or nothing, right? Which, I mean, technically, the definition of vegan, you can never be 100% vegan if you think about it. I mean, we've said this on the podcast before, like if you drive a car, if you paint your house, if you use a cell phone, if you have batteries that you use for things like, everything involves animal products to some degree. Now, mind you, some of those things are easier to choose to use versus others, right? But when it comes to the diet piece, there's a lot of folks out there who are all or nothing, like with their approach to veganism for others, right? Like, fine, they're vegan themselves. That's cool. But when they're sharing veganism, when they're sharing the message with other people, it's like either you go 100% or you suck and you're not doing it properly. And that is going to do, first of all, more harm to our whole movement. And second of all, is going to not have as much of an effect on the animals, the environment, all these things that we're trying to affect, right? So, yeah, I'm a so-called hardcore vegan and I wouldn't have clam juice in my recipe. But as you said, the book you wrote is not for people who have been vegan for 18 years. So if you can bring people on board through some of these options and then maybe have them reconsider them at some point, it's not an all or nothing black and white type situation. I'm all for that. My usual stance is if you can eat more plant-based foods that happen to automatically crowd out animal-based foods, by the way. So if you're trying these recipes, if you're trying some new types of foods that are plant-based, generally you're automatically eating fewer animal products just by default. I am on board with that. I'm on board with people making the decision to go mostly plant-based, to go vegetarian as a starting point. I mean, the hardcore vegans will say, well, it's not enough. And in a way, it's not. That's true. But overall, I would say you're still on a trajectory of some kind that's positive, also for your own health. I didn't mention that with the environment and the ethics and stuff. But I think what you're doing, especially in a culture that is so steeped in like culinary traditions, which happen to be very meat based and animal product based, I think this is a pretty awesome approach. And so, have you had people within the culture, like Cuban family members, friends, who have come from this very meat centric, animal product centric background and have had, even if they haven't gone completely vegan, have had some kind of moment where they're like, wow, I can actually make this completely plant based?
Yes, I've experienced that. My aunt would be the first.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I converted her. If I can convert her, I can convert anybody.
There you go.
I mean, we're talking hardcore Cuban lady who has expertise in the food and expertise in the presentation, and she's an amazing cook herself. She can write her own book. If I can convince her, and the way I convinced her was just how we were talking, just little by little, little by little. And once you get over the hump, right? Once you realize that you don't need that little piece of animal product in there, then it's a much easier conversation to say, you know what, why don't you just skip the clam juice
Right.
without the clam juice, see if you like it.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the times they do, because as I said before, your body starts to change and your palate starts to change. So
Mm-hmm.
thought was delicious, a few months ago, may not be the case. You know, I, I very rarely make myself a vegetarian dish because I can smell the animal at this point. Okay. But I'd rather have, like, to what you said before, I'd rather have someone who is going to consider making a change, and it helps everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You become vegetarian, it's less animals that you kill, it's less environmental destruction that happens, there's less water to give to animals, there's less food to feed animals that you're just waiting to slaughter. All these things have giant impacts on the environment. And I don't think, maybe I'm too jaded, maybe I'm too old to think that if I say, hey, look, the cow is upset that you're going to kill it, don't kill it. I don't think that carries as much weight as saying, listen, if I can make you drop 90 points off your cholesterol number in 30 days and you can eat twice as much, would you consider it? I think that's a more compelling argument, and it solves everything you're trying to solve, right? You kind of back door,
Exactly.
and you don't fight with people. Like that's the worst thing. Like I was on Twitter for a while with vegans, and I think that's more animal activist people than anything else. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's some people that are very passionate about animals, and I get it. Okay, I love animals, but I can't imagine a world where you're going to convince the powers that be, the people that actually have the money to have these giant ranches, you're going to convince them never to kill an animal again and sell it to the world. I don't see that happening. So, and maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I know money and people well too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's ever gonna. I don't think that's ever not gonna exist. So instead of appealing to people in that way, I kind of look. People in general, I think, are selfish.
I
Okay,
was gonna say the exact same thing.
people are selfish, and
Yep.
you got to appeal to that selfishness. Okay, animal preservation is not going to trump your own preservation. Okay, so just appeal to that. Just say, look, you
Mm-hmm.
sick all your life for the hamburger. Look, I have a good friend of mine. His name is Tom. Tom is married to a woman. I don't know her, but she has a gallbladder problem. Okay, and it got to the point where, and she's had it for years. I don't know what it is exactly, but he was telling me on the phone because he knows that I'm a vegan. He said, "Look, the doctor just told my wife that she's going to have to become vegan if she wants to solve her gallbladder problem."
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I said, "Okay, well, look, if she wants some advice, have her talk to me. I got recipes. I can help her out." They are so conflicted with becoming vegan that they almost rather not change and deal with the
Hmm.
gallbladder thing. I'm like, and I say, Tom, your wife is really considering keeping this ailment with her because she's too afraid to investigate the other side of all you're doing is eating. I mean, the other foods that you can eat that'll benefit her. I mean, is it really that big of a conflict? And he's Italian, so they're like, well, how do we give up cheese and how do we give up super sod and how we give up all these things? Well, you give them up little by little. That's the answer. Just like those guys that spin plates on those sticks. You ever see those guys? And they have
Yes.
10 plates. How do they do that? They
They
did it
didn't
one
start
plate
with
at a
10.
right. They do one plate at a time, right? It's the same thing. But I, I just don't see, I lost my train of thought. I think that if you appeal to people's selfish nature and say, look, if you really want to live without pills and problems and all that, you really have to consider this side. Like I don't take any pills. I look at my mother's husband. He has 8 pills. I mean, granted, he's 80, but he's got 8 pills in a container this long, and it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every day's a pill. I don't want to live like that, especially if you don't have to.
That's it exactly. I know it sounds super cliche, but it always reminds me of that whole saying about choose your hard. Like, dude, it's hard to have gallbladder issues. And yeah, it's hard making dietary changes. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you're used to eating a certain way and now you have this overwhelming challenge in front of you, or at least that's how it feels at first, to go completely plant based. Yeah,
Mhm.
sure, that's hard. But those are both situations that are difficult. So choose your hard, like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
choose the better
hard
one.
having diabetes. It's hard having gout. And sure, it was probably also hard at first making dietary changes. But
But
which one are you going to choose and why?
and quite frankly, and not that I'm trying to like, I don't want to come across as a braggart or anything like that. But quite honestly, if you use my book, you're not going to have that giant sacrifice.
Right. Hey, that's a good point.
The food is going to be hearty. The food is going to be filling. You'll be surprised how close it actually is. I mean, I've served things to people that are completely vegan without telling them they're vegan,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're like,
That's
I had no
classic.
idea that was vegan. Okay, so there's more of that. It's not just what you just ate. There's a whole bunch of things that you can make. You just have to get good at it. And I don't know. I think a step-by-step book that will teach you how to do it. I think it's a step in the right direction if you're that person. Look, at some point, I tell this to everybody. At some point, you're gonna have to consider it
Hmm.
because it's up to you. No matter how much exercise you do, marathon runner, whatever the case is, that animal product at some point is going to weaken your heart or give you cancer or make you feel sick. And you don't have to be like that. There's no reason in the world to live like that. And people just don't know. I mean, look at all the misinformation. You're in fitness, right? You must see
Oh, yeah.
misunderstandings of what actually is. Like my sister's a big fitness person. She's one of those CrossFit people.
Oh,
And
one of those CrossFit people. I like how you said that.
well, I don't mean it. I don't mean it like that. But
I know,
she
I know.
she is like what you would see on television. She's chiseled. She's got the 8 pack. She's a beast. Okay, the
Hmm. Hmm.
beast. But I know she's unhealthy on the inside because
Right.
majority of what she eats is skinless chicken and broccoli. The broccoli's fine, but the chicken is every meal almost. Right? It can't be good for you.
Hmm.
Um, I was gonna say something else and I lost track.
Misinformation, similar to the
Misinformation.
fitness world. Yeah, yeah.
So my sister, I had this conversation with my sister not that long ago. She's under the impression that there's such a thing as animal protein versus plant protein. And she's under the impression that the plant protein is a lesser quality protein somehow than the animal protein.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, look, you're out of your mind. There's no such protein. Okay, the only things in the world that make protein are plants. They take oxygen and nitrogen out of the air, they combine it, they make amino acids. And when the cow eats the grass, you're absorbing the grass protein through the cow and absorbing all the unhealthy things of eating the animal flesh because you're under the impression that that's how you get protein. You don't have to do that. Just eliminate the middleman. Just
Exactly.
from the
Yep.
source.
Hmm.
But that's brainwashing. She didn't know. She had no idea until I told her. So I mean, I love my sister to be vegan. I don't think she ever is going to be vegan because she's hard headed. But those are the little steps that people don't know. Like that's something that is obvious to us, but not obvious to most people. Most people don't even realize. I mean, there are people that'll spend 50% more on grass-fed organic beef, thinking that it's better than the normal beef because it's grass-fed and organic. It makes no difference. It's just I mean, look, there might be some truth to it. It might be slightly better for you than eating just the regular meat, but at the end of the day, it's still, animal flesh that's going to affect you, you know, adversely. It's all marketing, you
It
know,
is
and
absolutely all marketing. It's all
every,
marketing and myths, and that's why we're here to bust them.
yes, exactly. It's very similar to the tobacco companies.
Hmm.
Companies, they all knew it was bad, and they all knew they had it addicting. But if they can just create a little doubt, that little doubt goes a long way. So people go, well, look, it's not everybody that gets lung cancer from cigarette smoking. That's true. It's a true statement, but the majority do. It's undeniable. Well, it's the same thing with animal protein. It's going to make you sick at some point. May not make you sick in your 20s or in your 30s, but as you get older and as that all accumulates, then it starts manifesting the disease that you can't walk away from. And that's the danger of it. My grandmother died she died at 64 from the original source was colon cancer. And then over the course of 5 years, it spread to all her body and she died from that.
Oh, wow.
When I was 15, it was 1987. And the doctor talked to my mother and I about my grandmother's condition. And he said, look, this type of cancer comes from, as a direct result of eating red meat all your life. And he said,
Wow, and this is the 80s.
this is 1986.
Damn.
And he said to us, my mother and I, he said, the only animals in the world that should eat meat are cats because their digestive system is short and they're meant to do it. And the whole time he's telling me this, I'm like, why didn't anyone tell us this before it's too late? Like now, what do
Mm-hmm.
we do about this with this information? Right. And back then, no one cared about veganism. No one knew the benefits. So we took that information and we're like, okay, well, I guess if she was a tiger, she wouldn't be dying of cancer. Doesn't it seem odd that they know about these things and they don't say anything? I mean, the studies on cholesterol, diet, and human health, diet and cancer are at least 75 to 80 years old at this point. They've known all this for decades. And yet, it's somehow still in 2020, there's still question marks about what is healthy to eat and not healthy to eat. And reinventions of the same things over and over again. Like I remember when I was in grade school, they started calling pork white meat as if it was better than red meat.
Interesting.
Second white meat. So there was chicken and pork. Those were the white meats. And they never actually said it was better for you. They just kind of implied that it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then people stopped eating red meat and started eating chicken and pork. It's the same thing.
No difference.
None whatsoever. And, but people take some comfort in believing that people want to be healthier. They just don't know how to do it. And then they're led by the nose by food companies that say, well, listen, eat chicken, it's better for you than beef. And that's not true. Or people that, eat fish, they think fish is the healthiest thing for you in the world. It's the same thing as eating cow. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
but it's promoted in a different way. It's promoted as if it's better. How many times when you tell somebody that you're vegan, how many times do they say, well, you eat fish, right?
I heard that a lot in the early years for sure. Oh, you want a Caesar salad with some dressing on it? Or like, oh, do you want some chicken? Can you have a chicken burger? Like the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're vegan, so that means you eat fish and cheese? No, I don't eat any of them because they're animal products.
Yeah.
But that's all brainwashing and conditioning. No one really knows. No one, I would tell you if you ask 20 people on the street what it means to be vegan, really, I don't think 20 people could tell you.
It's getting better now that we have more access to information. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think all 20 random people in the population would have any idea. Now, mind you, this also depends where you are. If you ask this in my town, everyone would tell you what veganism is. But if you ask this like in the southern states or pretty much anywhere in North America that isn't like Vancouver or Portland,
Oh,
then
yeah.
yeah, I think I'm with you there. And also, people are really good at explaining their own choices, rationalizing their own choices. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, of course, there's a ton of misinformation, as you mentioned, marketing, just like bullshit out there that people are putting out to make a buck. Large companies, the dairy industry is a huge example. Like, who do you
Oh,
think is paying for the milk mustache campaign? Like, but there's also a lot of people who rationalize their decisions in an effort to keep doing what they're doing because they don't want to change. And so this is where a lot of these more ambiguous nutrition studies come in, where you can interpret them in different ways, or there's research on both sides of an argument. So it can get confusing. I mean, there's information overload for a lot of folks out there. I do understand, but it's also crazy to me, like you said, that in the 80s and well before we knew this stuff.
yeah. It's common scientific knowledge. They all know it. But I mean, I hate to sound jaded, but it all comes down to money, and there's just big money
It's
in
true.
cultural and meat industries. They're just giant amounts of money. I mean, look at the dairy industry, right? I can't cite the study, but I've read it. Okay, it's a scientific fact that the protein in cow's milk, the casein protein, is it's directly correlated to breast cancer in women. The correlation is so strong that they compare it to cigarette smoke and lung cancer. So it's not a little correlation. It's not an accidental one. It's a known one. And yet, still, when I don't know about Canada, in North America, here in the United States, when you go to the supermarket and you buy any yogurt, it'll have the pink ribbon on it for breast cancer.
Right. I know,
And
it's
meanwhile,
crazy.
the major ingredient that causes it is in that yogurt.
Mhm.
Unsuspecting woman who has no idea that she's feeding herself this, going to buy it in good faith because it has a ribbon on it.
Mhm.
I mean, that's almost criminal when you think about it because you're not revealing the actual truth about it. It's outrageous. But that's because
My hope is that well, realistically it'll probably be another 20 years, but waving a magic wand, sooner than that, how tobacco companies were in the past, like showing pregnant women in their ads
and
smoking,
doctors.
like, right? um that's kind of how I feel about the animal agriculture industry as a whole right now, like the milk mustache campaigns, and like who is actually telling us that meat products are healthy. So down the road, I know realistically this is like decades away probably, but I feel like we're going to go down that route. Maybe we'll have warnings on red meat to start off with, because there's a pretty good correlation there with health issues and cancer. Who knows? I mean, that's my wish for down the road, is how the trajectory of tobacco companies, a similar one for animal product companies.
I think you're right, and I think that it's going to be a step further, and it's going to be economically tied. Okay,
Oh, that's a good point.
because I think from what I've read and what I've seen, and when I say read, I mean I really dedicate myself to reading research wherever I can get it. Um, but the reality of it is, the idea of raising animals and killing them to feed the masses is unsustainable. You can't. There's just not enough
Hmm.
in the world. I mean, there's only so many trees you can cut down. There's only
Exactly.
animals you can raise. There's only so many, and people, make other people much quicker than animals make other animals, especially
Yeah.
when, especially when you're taking them to slaughter, right? All of that takes a tremendous economic toll on the environment, which no one talks about. Everyone talks about fracking and the emissions of cars and all that. That's just a fraction of what the agricultural industry issues every year. I mean,
Hmm.
I read that I believe it's probably 3 or 4 times more water is required to feed all the cattle in the United States than it does to frack for natural gas in the
I
whole country.
believe that. Yep.
I mean, think about that. That's an
Hmm.
enormous amount of resource for animals that you're going to kill to feed a certain amount of people. At some point, the price of that cow is going to skyrocket because there's going to be too many people. You're seeing it now with the milk industry. I can't prove this because I haven't done the research yet, but I suspect that the reason why there's so many choices for other kinds of milk, like soy milk and almond milk and all that, is because no one wants to pay $11 a gallon for milk.
Hey, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah, and if I was a food company and I saw this, they all see the trends. They all know where the prices are going. I mean, these people,
Hmm.
when you raise animals to feed people, you have to know how many animals you're going to be able to raise with what resources and what weather and all that. I'm sure they figured out, look, in the next 5 years, it's just going to be too expensive to make milk.
Hmm.
So if I'm a food company, I'm going to invest in almond milk and all these other things and bring them to market so that the price of my milk remains $2 a gallon. And I think that's all going to come from from the enemy. I think it's all going to be the same food companies that we're criticizing are all going to bring this to market because they have the economies of scale to do it. Okay, you can see it here. Like I, I'm assuming that in Canada it's probably the same. In Burger King now you can have, I think it's called the Impossible Burger.
Yeah.
That guy,
Yep.
you have that over there.
We do.
It's you can't tell it apart from the regular Whopper. Okay, but that isn't because, I mean, part of that is because there's a vegan market out there. Okay, but I'm not convinced that Burger King is doing that for the vegans. I have a feeling
No, they're
that
definitely not.
it's so expensive that it's probably better to just manufacture the meat yourself using plant-based, and there's an added benefit, right? Because it's trendy and it's cool, so it'll take off. I think it will. I've had them; they're indecipherable. McDonald's is doing the same thing here in January of 21. They're going
Hmm.
to their own plant-based burger.
They're a little late to the party, but at least they're joining.
Look, there's an option. I mean, when not that I crave beef or anything, but once in a while you kind of want to have some junk food, and it's
Yeah,
nice to know that that option's out there. You know,
absolutely. We have A&W here, which is a Canadian chain. We also have Burger King. They have had the Beyond Burger, which is the Impossible kind of, it's similar, that same idea. And the CEO has actually said of both companies, so A&W and Beyond Burger, their market is not vegans. Their market is folks who think plant-based is trendy. It is people who realize that plant-based faux meats like this are way better for the environment. So like 99% of customers at these stores are not vegan. So it's not a marketing scheme toward like all the vegans who are living in Canada, you know. Some of them are, sure, but it's a huge, large scale thing that companies are doing because they notice a business opportunity. A&W's sales increased by 10% just like overall as a company, just from having Beyond Burgers as an option, which is insane in the business world. So, you know, again, we're self-centered humans, and for these companies, business is number one. But
Yep.
in the process, they are potentially decreasing the amount of meat people are consuming because we're substituting this with something else. And it's way better for the environment, and not to mention animals and the ethical side of things. So, yeah, I think things are moving in the right direction, if slowly, but things are
Well,
happening.
look, the very fact that these giant chains have these things is
Hmm.
proof that it's moving in that direction.
That's
For all
true.
the reasons you're saying, I mean, these are all what I like to call the selfish reasons, right? There's
Yeah.
they make profit. I'm sure that their margins on a plant-based burger are much higher,
Hmm.
simpler than on a cow. It has to be, right? I mean, think about the vegetables you buy, and they buy these things on giant scales. I mean, it must be half of pennies
Hmm.
dollar to make the amount of burgers that they can make with these plant-based products. I agree. I think it's all at some point going to shift that way. It's going to take time, and I think they're going to call it something different than veganism.
I agree. Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
label. It's a label now that look. I got nothing against vegans, but if you ask my friends who are not plant-based people, if you mention to them that you're a vegan, they automatically think that you're, one of these activists that are trying to close down farms or PETA person. I'm not criticizing any of that. I think that if you have passion for that, you should follow your passions and do things. But as a business person looking at a broader market, you're alienating a lot of people with that label
It's
that
true,
would like to be
unfortunately.
called something else. Maybe we should be called, plant-based people or something else that doesn't have the same connotation because I think the connotation sometimes works against the cause.
It does.
At the end of the day, I'm of the opinion that, like I said before, if I can convince you based on health reasons, if that means more to you than saving an animal, then I've accomplished the goal either way. I've saved
Hmm.
an animal and I'm saving you, so to speak. We do the same thing. Burger King is doing it just for the sake of making a buck, but how many cows have they saved? Think about it. You know,
It's
it's
true. It's a win-win pretty much.
it's a better way. I think it's a better way of doing it. Um, and I think you have to. I think the only way to make these things work is if you have broad appeal.
Hmm.
You have to have. It has to be a lot more normal than what it is. Like it always makes me happy. Like when I go to a supermarket, like my supermarket put in a whole other vegan, vegetarian section in the whole supermarket. That tickles me pink. So, even though sometimes it isn't quite vegan or vegetarian. I mean, they put things in there that's gluten free but has meat in it.
Oh,
But
okay.
at the end of the day, though, it's a step in the right direction. It's people who
Hmm.
are trying to like improve things for other people. And we'll get there. I mean, God, I mean, 10 years ago there was no such thing. There was no such thing in supermarkets. You have to invent it yourself. And now you can
Oh,
buy
yeah.
whatever you want as a plant-based consumer, you know?
And you also can make 100 Cuban recipes completely plant-based.
Yep. It's helped me out tremendously. I mean, I can't thank these companies enough for producing, store-bought seitan. I mean, I make seitan.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not quite as good as the store-bought one because I don't have a giant factory that stamps out, chicken looking like meats made out of plants. But it's good. I mean, it gives you an option. So, like, if I make something with that seitan that I bought in the store for someone, and I convince them that they don't have to eat meat because of that, we all win, right?
100%. Absolutely. Well, why don't we leave it there for today, Ray? Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to have show notes Well, we always have show notes, but we're going to have links to your book so people can get their hands on there. I heard there's
Okay.
also a website in development. So if that comes live, can you send me a link to that and we will add that to our show notes?
Yes, absolutely. It should be live this weekend. My
Oh,
old
okay.
Yeah, my oldest son is very tech savvy, but he's a teenager. Until
Say no
he's
more.
Yeah, until he's like ready to do it, then
Uh-huh.
we're almost there. We have like I'm just trying to figure out what content to put on there at this point.
Got it. Okay.
Website it'll be vegancubano.com, and I'll send you the link. And listen, it was great speaking to you. I'm so glad that we did this. And if you ever need me as a guest or anything, feel free to reach out. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right, cool.
That was awesome. Hey, do I see a squat rack behind you? A
You
bench
do.
press rack? That is freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's I got that on Amazon. It's a squat rack, dip machine, bench. It was I have probably about 500 pounds worth of weights here, maybe a little bit more.
Nice. Very
I
nice.
but I find myself having trouble getting to it because I work full time. Now I'm doing this book thing, and I have two babies in diapers, so working out has had to take a back at this point. But no, I do.
You'll be back though. It'll be back. I
Oh, it's
understand
in
the
me.
kid situation. Like it'll be back.
It's look, I've always exercised. I've always been an athlete. This is probably the worst shape I've been in a while.
Yeah, but you have good reasons. Not everybody does.
Is that what you do full time? You're a fitness
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
like a
So
personal trainer?
we're completely online. So I've got two other team members. Izzy is the one that you were corresponding with. So she does social media content and all the podcast related
Mhm.
things. And then Zoe is my assistant coach, also vegan, super long term. So we just work with people around the world. We've got vegans in Saudi Arabia and Dubai and
Whoa.
Sweden. Man, it's awesome. Most of our clients are from the States, but maybe 20% aren't. And they're from like really cool places. Japan, there's someone in Japan where it's apparently really hard to be vegan. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's amazing. So
that's a heavy fish culture. I mean, I
it
don't
is.
ever get away from that, but
Yep. So, and some of these people don't know any other vegans at all, like especially where they live, or they don't have as many social connections, whatever. And then when they come to this whole like vegan plus fitness, they're like, oh wow, there are other people in the world who are into this. They're like, oh, they do exist.
we're not alone.
We're not alone. And
Although,
now also like with gyms being closed and people working out at home, like the setup you have is coveted by many right now. The
really,
whole
there's
concept is like the concept of online coaching is now front and center. Like that's what people are searching for at this point.
hmm. Well, look, if I ever get back into it big, I'll look for a coach, huh?
Heck yeah. Definitely. We could kick some ass for sure. I see your setup. You got what you need.
I got two Olympic bars too.
Awesome. Part of
Yeah.
the reason we moved, my husband and I, we bought a property 6 hours away from Vancouver. Vancouver is like where we were born and raised. We've never lived anywhere else. But we moved in 2018 because Vancouver, like if you want to buy, you're looking at a median price of like 1.5 mil. It's
Good
ridiculous.
God.
Seriously.
And
For like
that's just for a house.
for like a small property tear down kind of shitty house. What we wanted is like the veggie garden, the gym, like detached building, all this kind of stuff. So we had to move. Mind you, it's beautiful here. Sunshine Coast is where we live. Ocean, lake, forest, like it's amazing. But we can do that because we work online. If we had jobs, if we were in schools or, we can't just pack up and leave and go wherever we want.
Yeah.
But it does mean I have my own gym now, finally, after 10 years of like salivating over gym equipment.
It's nice to have room, you know. It's
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I live about 50 miles outside of Manhattan.
Uh-huh.
And once you cross the Hudson River, it's like Sphinx and pyramids, like it's just the whole world is on the other
Just
side.
sand dunes, like
It's so nice. So I live in a place called well, you'll never know what it is. It's Hewitt, New Jersey, which is a hamlet of a bigger town.
okay.
just like you, I mean, if I wanted to live close to Manhattan, I'd have to spend, $1 million on a fixer-upper. That's
Exactly. Yep. Same deal. It's
out
ridiculous.
here. I'm on a half acre of land. I got a house,
Hmm.
floors. I have a gym. I have a whole setup. I have a whole entertainment system right next to me over here. I'm in the basement part, which is completely finished.
Hmm.
And then there's obviously the main floor and then the top floor. But you couldn't get that anywhere
No,
near Manhattan.
me neither.
Not Certainly not for a reasonable price. And I never understood that anyway. Like I don't understand why people volunteer to put themselves in incredible debt just to live
Seriously.
5 minutes from work.
We're going to pay off this house in 6 years, like completely. It's
Incredible.
ridiculous, like insane.
Incredible.
Where else can you do that while also working full time and like, doing your thing?
Yeah.
You
And
can't do
having
that in main cities.
No, you can't. And I mean, look, you really got to like people to live in a city because they're above you,
Yeah. Yeah.
next
That
to you.
cancels me out from that situation.
Yeah, I have a little hard time with that too.
Uh-huh. That's
No, really.
hilarious.
Look, I work in Manhattan, and I don't want to keep you longer than you need to be.
No,
So,
it's all good.
well, just tell me. I work in Manhattan, and all of my clients live in apartments. They're all millionaires, but they all live in these tiny New York
Yeah.
City.
Mm-hmm.
$2.5 million in New York City gets you 2 bedrooms. That's it. How do you even do that? $2.5 million. You know what $2.5 million buys me in this town?
Oh
I
my
don't
God.
think you can
Yes.
buy. I don't think there's anything that's listed for over $1 million. You'd probably get a teleport, I would imagine.
Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah. Same here.
yeah. It's
It's ridiculous. We
I
actually
I
bought
would
this place without seeing it in person because 6 hours away, it's actually two ferries and 6 hours away.
I
Even though
like the
it's,
two berries thing.
yeah, it's on the mainland, but you can only get to it by ferry because there's all these fjords, right? But yeah, so
Awesome.
we bought this place sight unseen based on our realtor basically just like showing us little video walkthroughs. But this room right here, which is soundproof, we didn't know existed until we saw the house for the first time. We're like, dude, it has a recording room. What the hell? So my husband has all his music gear. We're doing the podcast in here. Like we didn't even know this was a thing until we got here, which
Do the
is,
people that you bought it from, were they like musicians or
yeah,
something?
yeah. And so we both are as well. My husband and I, we're not like pro musicians, but we do like gigs and random stuff. And so we actually use that as an in because this town, people want to know who's buying their house. There's like the personal connection. In
Okay.
Vancouver, just throw money at someone and they'll just pick you based on your offer. But here it's like, hey, we're also musicians. We would make use of your space. Even though we didn't know this exact room existed, we knew that they were musicians. Yeah, so it's perfect. He's got all his stuff here. He does recording in here.
And
We would not have had that in Vancouver.
is it a cold weather area up there?
Well, it's not like Eastern Canada. Like we don't get snow every year. So it's not
It's
like
not
when we get snow, the city shuts down because people don't know how to drive in it. But it's also not like Southern California where you're out there like on the beach at all times. So,
sure.
you
And you
know,
can't buy a thing in Southern California.
no,
It's so expensive.
yeah, it's ridiculous. We're kind of like Portland and Seattle type weather. So like rainy in the winter, not a ton of snow. And then
Yeah.
summers are
I've
great.
never been to Canada. I've been close to it. Like I saw Toronto from Buffalo.
It's getting close.
It's right across the
That's
great.
hilarious.
Yeah, I've never. I mean, most of my traveling has been to South America. That's
Ah, right.
just from there. So I've been to
That makes
Colombia
sense.
and all those areas down there. I gotta tell you, South America is it's kind of stuck in time. It's curious to see, like,
Hmm.
have the internet and everything is modern, like modern to the extent that they have it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the house from the outside and you look at the city, it looks like no one's done a thing to it since like 1979. It's like,
Wow.
and that's everywhere you go. They have the main church in the center of town, then the whole town's around the church, and it's like forgotten,
It's so interesting.
tied up to posts. And this is like not country areas, like normal, not quite cities, but in between. People still have horses and stuff that they tie up on the public grass that's between the sidewalk and
Wow.
yeah, it's killing. I enjoy all that stuff. Like if you show that makes me happy.
Yeah, totally. I don't see
Quaint,
how it
weird
couldn't.
things like that.
That's why we live where we do and not in Vancouver because we got sick of the big city.
Yeah, I mean, look, they'll drive you crazy.
Mhm.
And every year there's some other regulation, some other thing you can or can't do. It's always some kind of imposition, and everything costs more money. Everything here is
Yeah,
half as expensive.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Easily. It's
You would
crazy.
think that most people would be like, hey, maybe I should live in the place where it's less expensive. I'd have more money. I have a bigger place. No,
We're
strange.
seeing a lot of people move here now because there's so many folks who are now officially remote workers. And we didn't
Yeah.
have that before. So we do have people who are getting it now. Like, oh, I could live wherever I want. Let me get the hell out of Vancouver or whatever. So that's becoming more of a thing, which is increasing housing prices here, mind you.
Yep. We're having the same problem with the COVID thing in Manhattan has scared everybody out of Manhattan.
Right?
There's 75,000 vacant apartments in Manhattan.
Wow.
An obscene number. That doesn't. I don't even know how to compute that. I couldn't even tell you what that would look like. That's like
That is crazy.
almost every building is empty. It's incredible. And these are high-end buildings, and they're all leaving to buy, lake houses, which is kind of where I live. So
Hmm.
driving the prices up here, which of course is going to drive the taxes up, and everything I try to escape, they're just coming back.
I know. Pros and cons.
Yeah.
Well, it was great speaking with you. I'll let you go, but we are like stockpiling some of our interviews, and then we have new episodes every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I don't have my publication schedule in front of me, but obviously we'll let you know. If there's anything else that you want to add to our show notes, though, like when your website is live, we do have the URL. It's for sure going to be live by the time this episode comes out. But if there's anything else that comes up, things you want to add, just email
Yeah.
me links and we'll add them to our show
Yeah. And if you
notes.
need anything, just let me know. Okay. But like I said,
Awesome.
the opportunity. It was great speaking to you.
You too.
Hopefully this can be continued.
Absolutely.
All
To
right.
be
Beautiful.
continued. All right, Ray. Thanks so much. And it's Raydel, your full name, right?
That's
Okay.
correct. Right now.
Because we're going to introduce you both ways.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.
See ya.